Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, Healing Our Native American Veterans. This webinar is being presented by the Eastern Region Training and Technical Assistance Center, which is a resource of the Administration for Native Americans. Before we start, I would like to go over some housekeeping items. Okay, the first item is that this webinar is being recorded and it should be available on the ANA website and the Eastern's website in about 2 weeks. Next, you should have come into this webinar muted, but if for some reason you were not, please take a second to mute yourself. We want to make sure that everyone can clearly hear the presentation today. And then we do plan on having a question and answer session at the end of this webinar. But if you have a question anytime during the webinar, please type it into the chat box. And we will try to answer the question as they come in. But if for some reason we don't get to it, we'll answer it during the Q&A session towards the end of the webinar. So let me introduce myself, CO. Hello, my name is Kwani Asui, and I will be facilitating this webinar today. I am the Technical Assistance Specialist 2 for the Eastern Region Training and Technical Assistance Center, and I've been with them for 3 years now, and I'm an enrolled member of the United Kituwa Band of Cherokees in Oklahoma. We were scheduled to have 2 presenters from Trickster Cultural Center, but unfortunately David is not able to join us today, but our Gina is. So our first presenter is Gina Roxas. Gina is of the Fish Clan and an enrolled member of the Prairie Band Potawatomi Nation. Gina has studied the environment through a multifaceted lens of traditional teachings from her grandmother and family elders, as well as the humanities and science. As the program director at Trickster, Gina brings her knowledge and experience to plan, develop, and oversee the implementation and evaluation of programs that Trickster offers to the community. Gina is also the medicinal garden manager and facilitates programs that centers traditional plant knowledge as it relates to healing, environmental justice, and self-determination. And I know David is not with us today, but I'd like to go ahead and introduce him. David Tepper was going to present with Gina, and he is a member of the Trickster Cultural Center Board of Directors. He is a photographer and an educator. He has been an integral part of the Trickster Cultural Center community in a variety of capacities. Trickster has collaborated with David on many projects, including the past ANA project, which included the Emmy-nominated documentary D-Day, It Was Our War Too, which we will be viewing a little bit of later in this webinar. David is a U.S. Navy veteran and a graduate of Arizona State University in Tempe, Arizona. So please help me welcome Gina, and I will turn it over to Gina.
Bonjour, welcome everyone. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Kwani, for the introduction. Again, my name is Gina Roxas. I am the program coordinator, program director at Trickster Cultural Center. So Trickster Cultural Center is a 501c3 not-for-profit organization that is located in Schaumburg, Illinois, which is a northwest suburb of Chicago. So we are in an urban setting, actually a suburban setting. And our goal is to highlight and uplift Native American arts as it relates to the contemporary world today. We do a variety of programming and events for our community. And so a little bit of background on Trickster. Trickster started out as Trickster Art Gallery, uplifting and highlighting contemporary artwork made by Native American artists that were post-Vietnam War era artists. And so most of those artists that we were hosting were veterans of war. And they were using their art as a form of healing from the traumas from war or traumas from life in general. And so as we started working with the veteran artist and developing relationships with them, we found that there are so many other issues and other ways that we can support, not just by helping them with their art, but also by developing programs and collaborations to help with the healing process. And so art has always been the center of our programs. We've always used art as a form or as a vehicle for our programming and events. And because we have started, our meager beginnings was with veterans and veteran led, we rely on our veterans to help lead us into the direction that they feel is needed for our community. Our community is a mix of Native and non-Native members. They are from many tribal nations. We are located in a suburb of Chicago in the state of Illinois. And uniquely, Illinois is one of the few states that does not have reservation land or a tribe that is established in the state. And so we have a lot of variety of tribal nations that are represented and that we work with, which I find is very unique and very rewarding, because we get to experience art and culture from so many different cultures. Um, and so while we were doing that, and again, this has been taking decades for us, developing relationships with our veterans, and expanding into different programming. And in the last few years, we really focused on healing and healing methodologies and going back to traditions and ceremonies. And so Trickster Art Gallery kind of outgrew their name. And now we are called the Trickster Cultural Center, where we provide teaching and support and knowledge to the community at large, as well as a space for our Native American veterans to heal and to continue practicing their traditions and their beliefs. As you can see, Trickster is an urban building, but surrounding that building is a medicinal garden. And so these plants were hand selected and hand picked by our veterans that have cultural connections to healing, cultural ties to healing. They were maybe used in medicines or in ceremony. And so we've been working very diligently with our veterans and with our elders to learn more about these plants and learn more about the history and the culture of the area. And so we've been working really, really closely with programs that center on veterans and healing plants for this past year. And again, veteran led. And we wouldn't be able to do any of this without first developing a relationship with our veterans. We found that just going into a community or into a veteran community without developing a relationship, and this goes with probably any community, it really is a hard and slow going process to do any type of work. And so some of the key programs that we have is every July, we host the National Gathering of American Indian Veterans, and that is held outdoors at Kintini Park, which is a natural area, and members from all over the US and Canada come and join veterans. They bring their eagle staffs and they bring their drum, and we have ceremony, and as well as workshops and guest speakers and other events. It's a 3-day event where veterans can come together in camaraderie, regardless of what tribe they're in or affiliated with, and having that veteran experience come together to talk to each other, to learn from each other, and to heal. This past July, we hosted workshops at the National Gathering that, again, centered on plants and the uses of plants. For me, as a Potawatomi person, a lot of the ceremony and traditions that I have center on plants, and maybe I really didn't think about that until starting to work with the veterans. Tobacco and smudging with sage and sweetgrass and cedar. Those are all healing plants that have been used just day in and day out. And so learning more about these plants, how to care for them, how to use them in a good way, has been really rewarding for me, as well as being able to share that and engaging with our veterans. The other project that I wanted to highlight as well is our Healing from Domestic Violence project. And this came out of actually the National Gathering. So one year at the National Gathering, there was a panel discussion of our veterans asking, someone from the audience asked them, why did you join the military? What made you join the military? Being that Native Americans are the largest ethnic group per capita to have to be involved in military since the Revolutionary War, that was a question that was asked of them. Why do you do it? Why do you join? And one of our panelists said that they joined the military to get out of a domestic violence situation. And through that weekend of healing and talking with each other, there was a group of women who had very similar situations. And they started this project, Healing from Domestic Violence. And so you see in this image, there's a core group of Native American military veterans who started this project of interviews and portrait photographs, which David had done. Um, and the interviews and the talkings were not about particularly their experience of domestic violence, but it was more about what they did to help heal, how the road to healing looked for them, and how the military may have been part of that, whether it was good or bad. But again, opening up to discussion. And from there, it was expanded to other military folks. Um, from other tribal nations as well as non-native, and then that expanded also to men. We had some men who also stepped up and said, hey, I was in a domestic violence situation, and I want to share my story of healing. From that art exhibit, photography exhibit, we developed healing circles, panel discussions, guest speakers, and a resource guide on our webpage to help with anyone, veteran or not veteran, to help with healing if they're in a domestic violence situation. And even expanding on this project, we also have been working with the state of Illinois on a project that expands on this domestic violence project to bridge the gap between the generations. And so a lot of the work we've been doing this year has been prevention and intervention, and how this generation that's part of the exhibit could share their story with the younger generations to help them either not go down that path or help them get out of a domestic violence relationship. And so it's been very rewarding being able to expand on these projects, and now from a small group of women to the community wide, and now this this next leg of our project of bridging the gap between generations, because sharing our knowledge is intergenerational. Generally speaking, for many Native folks, it's the passing of knowledge from generation to generation is how we continue our traditions and our stories and our language. And so we move to traditional healing practices. And so it's very great to have discussions and guest speakers and panelists and these art exhibits. But now, let's practice what we've been talking about. And so we've been hosting culture camps, nature camps with our youth, coming through with these last two, the National Gathering, as well as the domestic violence projects, and bringing that to our youth, incorporating healing plants with these. So talking about trauma from a youth perspective, talking about the role of a veteran and the role of a leader to our youth, and bringing our veterans out. This camp that you're seeing was actually veteran led, and providing space for veterans to share their knowledge, tell their story, but also for our youth to learn that and experience that. A lot of our suburban youth are in not a traditional home or a Native American traditional home where you have that extended family. It may just be, the child and the parents. There isn't the aunties or the uncles or the grandparents there on a regular basis to help sharing knowledge. And so providing space and providing programming for our youth to learn these traditions has been integral in continuing these projects, and continuing the trajectory of the projects. And so we had a whole summer of different types of healing camps and culture camps throughout the area, utilizing natural space and our garden and healing plants. And so, what now? So we have just been graciously awarded another ANA grant, which is Healing for One, Healing for All, where we will be we will be working with 6 tribal nations, veterans groups, and working on focusing on the healing plants. Prior to that, we focused on ceremony and tradition. So this is the next leg, healing plants, and working with our tribal elders, our veterans, and developing programming and curriculum, not only to support the tribes and that we're working with, but it's a collaboration to also learn from them and bring that back to our urban setting and share that with our youth. And with anyone actually who is interested, and again utilizing plants and plant knowledge. I have a background in planting in plants and I guess you would call it ethnobotany, and so growing up with my grandparents on the Prairie Band Potawatomi Reservation, we did a lot of growing and I learned a lot of healing knowledge from my elders. I was fortunate to have a grandmother and elders to be able to teach me those things. And so that experience led me to this project of how can we do that for our youth, and how can we bridge the gap between our veterans and the rest of the community, because it's not just supporting the community or not just supporting the veterans, but it's bridging those gaps and supporting the community as a whole. Especially working with our younger veterans, our veterans who have just become veterans this past 20 years. We found that although panel discussions and learning opportunities like that are great and wonderful, these young veterans they want to be able to find their place back in the community, to learn about what their role is now and how they can be good ancestors to the community, and provide space for them to heal. And in community is how we heal. It's very difficult to do that on your own, and being able to provide um, gardening and planting and harvesting and medicine making from our traditional ways. Just the mere act of doing so is healing. And so even if we plant a crop and it doesn't come out the best we want it to, it was that act of healing and the act of community, the act of planting and the community, that we were able to work out some of these issues that we have, and heal each other. So thank you so much again for offering this space for me to talk to you today. Again, it's a very long process to with any community, developing a relationship before you can even begin to do any type of work, and doing it in collaboration, not coming into the community saying I'm going to teach you this or I'm going to teach you that, but coming into a collaboration with what can we help each other with, what can we offer, what can we learn from each other. That's the best way, and the most rewarding of these different projects that we've been doing. And again, I apologize. David Tepper is a veteran, and so we had a death in the community, and so as a veteran he had some responsibilities and wasn't able to make it today, but he did want to share how he's been utilizing photography to share the stories of what we've been doing and the experiences of what we've been doing. And again, with David. We've been using David Tepper as our photographer for I believe the past 10 years now, and we've developed a really great relationship with the community and within the community to be able to comfortably photograph some of these things that may not have been photographed before, or weren't even thought about being photographed, and doing it in a good and respectful way. So again, thank you for having me. And I wanted to spend some time to answer any questions that you all may have, and utilize the rest of the time to talk about or to view D-Day Warriors. It was our War II. This was a film that came out of our past ANA grant, which actually was nominated for an Emmy. And so it talks about the Native American experience in the D-Day War. And again, you'll see throughout the film the use of plants for healing, and that was what sparked our interest in learning more about plant and plant knowledge. And we're really looking forward to working with ANA for this next project, as well as working with our veterans and our veteran organizations. Thank you.
Thank you, Gina. So I'm going to stop sharing and move my screen over to the video.
Did we want to answer any questions right now?
Do you want to do that now, or do you want to do that after the film?
I think we should answer questions so that if we don't have time,
Okay.
we get to the questions. And so Kwani has the link to the film. So if we don't get to watch the entire film, Kwani can share that link with all the attendees.
I do have a question slide, so let me pull that up. And then I had the picture on there. I had some information about the picture on there, so let me share that. So before we get to the questions, I wanted to talk about this picture on this slide. It is a picture of the National Native American Veterans Memorial, honoring the military service of Native Americans, and it is located on the grounds of the National Museum of the American Indian in Washington, D.C. And the memorial, it's titled Warriors Circle of Honor, and it was designed by Harvey Pratt, a Cheyenne and Arapaho tribes of Oklahoma artist. And the design incorporates water for ceremonies, benches for gathering and reflection, and 4 lances, which you can see one of them on the left-hand side of the picture. There's 4 of those where veterans, family members, tribal leaders, and others can tie cloths for prayers and healing. And this memorial opened several years ago on November 11th, 2020. So even though it opened up 3 years ago, or 2 years ago, and this coming Veterans Day, a Native Veterans Procession and Dedication Ceremony will take place this year on Veterans Day. So that's November 11th. And it's going to be followed by a weekend of celebration on November 12th and 13th. And you can find more information on the procession and ceremony and the celebration events on the NMAI website. So that's all I wanted to say about that picture. And so yeah, if there's any questions, let's go ahead and answer them. I see one question in the chat from Lorraine. She asks, have any programs utilize opiate awareness with youth and veterans? Same with substance abuse prevention at the same time?
To my knowledge, I don't think there has been, but I don't know. That's a great question, and I know that is something that is needed. We have not focused on that. Our focus has been returning to those sacred plants, particularly focusing on the 4 sacred plants of the Great Lakes region: cedar, tobacco, sage, and sweetgrass. I do know that there are some initiatives in Illinois and the Midwest regarding the differences in tobacco, commercial tobacco use and ceremonial tobacco, and working with the youth on distinguishing the two. But I don't know about opioids or substance abuse, but those are really great projects if somebody can do that. And it would be a great key and tie-in with the youth and the veterans. I think that's a great project.
Okay, I don't see any other questions in the chat box. If you have a question, feel free to unmute yourself if you're able to. Okay, don't hear anyone or see anything. So maybe you'll have more questions after the video.
This is Europe. This is the wall of the Nazi fortress. All the skill of a brutally great military and engineering people have gone into the construction of this wall. Today, boys from New York and London, from Seattle and Manchester, from Toronto and Montreal, from Marseille, Warsaw and Prague, from Narvik, and from thousands of other Allied homes are doing what Hitler and Napoleon dared not do: cross the waters of the English Channel and attack the fortified coast on the other side. The target is the German army and its leaders, who are probably not smiling today. In the hills of Persia last December, today's fighting on the coast of France was planned and put on the Allied calendar. In Britain, the dispossessed soldiery of Europe prepared for the voyage home. The Dutch, the Poles, the Czechs, the Norwegians remembering the bitter spring of 1940. From the New World came the Americans, and on their own soil, the British, who prepared for a different invasion 4 years ago. All waiting for the signal from the men who had beaten the German in Africa, Sicily and Italy, and were now turning their attentions to the Germans in the West.
I was born in Connecticut, and my parents got caught up in the stock market crash and eventually lost their jobs in Connecticut. They had no work. My parents decided to move back to the Indian reservation. We had our own schools on the reservation, but my mother insisted that I would attend the white schools in Old Town, Maine. We grew up under discrimination and ridicule. But I eventually made friends, and I continued my education in the white schools in Old Town, Maine until I graduated in 1942.
Today's Army is typified by a modern combat division, an inspiring picture of the men who make up an effective fighting unit. You're part of the big team, soldier. From newest recruit to oldest veteran. That means being part of the United States Army, USA.
Perhaps all of the Penobscot Indians that went into the service at that particular time volunteered. However, my mother was an advocate for the Penobscot Indian Nation people. She wrote to President Roosevelt about voting rights.
My mother did not agree that we should be conscripted into the military service if we had no voting rights, because we were fighting for a government that we were not citizens of. All of my brothers volunteered. I had three brothers that volunteered for the military service, but I chose to be drafted because I was supporting my mother, and I thought I was supporting her by doing this.
Well, Charles was 19 years old when he has been drafted in the U.S. Army. He has been trained in the U.S. as a combat medic.
was assigned to the 16th Infantry Regiment, and I joined the 2nd Battalion, and eventually I wound up as a medic with F Company.
And his first taste of combat is in one of the most bitter battles the United States Army has ever fought.
June 5th. The LCIs are loaded. The next time these men step ashore will be on an enemy beach. At 15:30, a Coast Guard flotilla of LCIs leaves, loaded with engineers, medical corpsmen, and infantry.
The fleet crossed the English Channel in the middle of the night between June 5th and June 6th of 1944.
When I was traveling to Normandy, I met a Penobscot Indian by the name of Melvin Neptune, who was a veteran of North Africa and Sicily. And he was a scout with the 26th Infantry Regiment, 1st Infantry Division. I was very pleased to meet him, but he did not give me any advice, and I did not ask for any. We were concentrating on our rendezvous with the Germans. We did not talk about our military service. We talked about young boys, young men that we grew up with on the Indian reservation.
D-Day approaches, and the ships are in their assigned positions.
And anchored about 12 miles offshore. That would keep them out of range of any big guns that the Germans happened to have.
And below decks, officers study the maps that mark the invasion beachheads on the coast of Normandy.
So the plan was to land on the Calvados coast of Lower Normandy in France, basically between the French cities of Le Havre in the east and Cherbourg in the west. The entire invasion area is about 70 or 75 miles. There are 5 landing beaches. 2 of them are American, Utah and Omaha. Juneau was Canadian, and then the Brits on their flanks at Gold and Sword beaches. Omaha Beach is about 5 miles wide, but that stretch of landing beach is flat sand, and it's scallop-shaped.
We were supposed to debark Omaha Beach on the 5th of June, but the weather was so bad they had to postpone it to the next day, to the 6th of June.
So those suboptimal conditions colored the experience of every soldier who landed at Omaha Beach. The airstrikes couldn't see their targets and didn't attempt to bombard the beach. Likewise, the naval gunfire could not pick out particular German fortifications.
About 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, they threw a rope over the side of the ship, and we went down the rope ladder to the invasion craft. The waves were very high, 6, 7, almost up to 10 feet high.
And the first thing he has to do is time the jump into the landing craft, because the landing craft is rising and falling against the side of the ship. And if you do that wrong, carrying 75 pounds of equipment, you're going to break your legs.
Anyway, I went down the ladder and jumped and made it into the landing craft.
It takes hours for all those landing craft to be loaded and organized into the assault waves that are going to head into the beach, and that beach is 12 miles away. So your average soldier in an LCVP, the assault landing craft, by the time he hits the beach, he's probably been in that thing for at least 2 or 3 hours, and maybe as many as 5, 6, or 7 hours.
About 5 o'clock in the morning, eventually the order came for us to move in the direction of the beach.
The soldiers are crammed in like sardines, and they get drenched. It's cold. The spray comes over the top and soaks everybody and everything, and then soldiers start to get seasick.
Of course, there's a lot of fire going on, firing. The Germans were firing from the shore. The Americans were firing for ships that had been assembled.
And some veterans have told us in interviews, I didn't care what was on that beach. I just wanted off of that stupid landing craft.
All those men, all those women, especially on D-Day, they saved the world from the worst tyrant there was, the worst prejudice there ever was. I believe the world would be totally different if it wasn't for June 6, 1944. Native Americans played a big part in it. They had many soldiers, Marines, military personnel involved.
Why did you come to fight? Well, we understand losing our land and our way of life, and we don't want that to happen again to anybody.
We have always supported the United States government in all wars from the very beginning. The Revolutionary War, the First World War, the Second World War, and so on through history.
But people don't realize that we were under attack already from Germany with U-boats and everything right off shores, and people don't realize that. And in our way, our clan mothers told the people, come together and go defend our land, Turtle Island, and our men went, and they went to serve.
Well, Native Americans were in all units, and they were the first ethnic group in the US Army. And they were great warriors because they were used to be warriors to defend their land, their homeland.
With the Penobscot Indians, our population had been decimated to 500 individuals, including women and children. During the Second World War, we had 85 young men and women in the military service, which was one of the highest percentages of representation of any community in the United States.
You know, there was 37 tribes that had code talkers. The language was trying to be taken from us was finally used as to save this country. So it was our war too.
Well, I don't know if you should say scary, but it was something that I was experienced that I had never experienced before.
Now the problem is, none of the German defenses have been suppressed, which was the plan.
Some of the landing barges are stopped by concrete obstacles built far out in the water by the enemy.
The Germans had placed these obstacles under the water. Once we got near the beach, we hit one or two of these obstacles that were on the water. You could not see them.
And so instead of landing sort of casually and going after prisoners and the occasional sniper, they're being shot at by every gun along that beach from as soon as they get within range. Many of them are destroyed in the water.
Eventually, they dropped the ramp, and some of the men that were standing in the front of the landing craft were hit by machine guns or small arms fires, and many of them died right there before they could leave their boat.
Soldiers can see that they're sitting ducks headed into the beach, or if their landing craft is unfortunate enough to hit an obstacle, the soldiers will abandon it. They jump out of the side, saying, I'm not staying here. But they're carrying 75 pounds of equipment.
So I landed into water up to my chest. The infantrymen, they were too heavily loaded with equipment, and many of them drowned right there.
But they stripped that equipment off to save themselves, and now if they make it into the beach, they're going to be without equipment, without a weapon, without ammunition. They're just a person on the beach.
There was a German gun emplacement which was known as WN-62. We landed right in front of this machine gunner.
We landed at low tide so that we could see the obstacles and not get hung up on them. But the low tide mark off Omaha Beach is at least a quarter of a mile from the high tide mark, and it's a sand flat. So if the soldier makes it to that point, now he's got to run across that flat tidal plain under all that fire and just hope to God that he makes it.
They could not expect help from anybody because at that particular time, it was every man for himself. Survival was on the minds of everybody.
He's seasick, he's scared to death, he's carrying a lot of equipment, if he still has his equipment. And because we landed at low tide, the tide is coming in behind him, and so if he's wounded or delayed, the chances of drowning in the incoming tide is very, very high.
We used the German obstacles that were buried from under the water all the way up to the beach. I went from one obstacle to the next until I got close enough to the beach, and then I left and ran for the dry part of the beach, and I made it.
I would say that eventually, by the end of the day, the majority of those make it onto the beach. But those very first assault waves, the casualties are horrific.
The captain that was in charge of the F Company, instead of carrying a rifle, he was carrying a walking stick like I have here. He was using his stick and he was hitting the men on the backs and telling them to get off your ass and let's go and move up. He said, you want to die here, you want to die in inland.
Within an hour, Omaha Beach is a disaster. Pinned down on the beach, riddled with casualties, without equipment, without weapons, and it looks like this is a failure.
Seeing so many dead, it was very difficult. And I had to clear my mind from everything, what I was seeing, and do the work that I was trained to do.
Charles, as a medic, was crawling from wounded soldier to wounded soldier and exhausted his medical supplies very, very shortly after arriving on the beach.
I looked back out to the sea and I saw that the tide was coming in very fast. Many of the wounded men could not help themselves, they could not move, and they were drowning. So I dropped what I was doing on the shoreline and I went back to the water.
In many cases, soldiers were decorated in the aftermath for these extreme acts of bravery, but we'll never know most of the stories.
I don't know where the strength came from. I know that one infantryman had reported that he saw me pulling men much bigger than I was, and he did not know how I was able to do it. Now, I don't know how many lives I saved. I probably saved a few.
One of the people that he treated and could not save was his best friend, a young soldier named Eddie Morozevich.
He had a very serious stomach wound, and I had no way to stop it. So I knew that he was dying. He knew it also, I think. I gave him a shot of morphine to ease his pain, and while I was treating him, he eventually passed on. He left this life. We had said goodbye to each other because we knew that we would never see each other again. And, well, I did what I could for him, but I could not save his life. And, well, he passed on.
Okay, sorry I had to had to stop it, but I don't want to go over our time. Stop sharing the video. Like I said, the video link is in the chat box. And let me share my screen back to the PowerPoint. I would recommend, if you have an hour of your time, to watch this documentary. It was really riveting, emotional. You might want to have a box of tissue next to you, especially with the healing part. I know we didn't get to that part. Towards the end of the video, it shows how Charles goes back to France and his healing, and some of the other veterans that weren't there but were in other wars, their healing, and then also the 75th anniversary of D-Day. So a really good documentary. Like Gina said, it was Emmy nominated. So go and check that out when you have time. So are there any other questions after the video or anything else someone thought of while we were watching the video? No? Okay. So we'll go on ahead. I don't want to go over our time. So we'll move on to the next slide. All right, so this is just a little plug for our technical assistance centers. For those that are new to ANA has 4 regional training and technical assistance centers. We'll start with the Eastern region, which covers the area of North Dakota, straight down to Texas and everything east of there. Moving west, the Western region covers the remaining lower 48 states. The Alaska region serves the state of Alaska. And the Pacific region covers Hawaii, Guam, American Samoa, and the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands. The regional training and technical assistance centers provide free training and technical assistance to grant applicants and grant recipients. And right now, the TA centers are in the middle of hosting project planning and development training, or PPD training for short. And so that's going on with our centers right now. And as some of you know, the ANA Notice of Funding Opportunities were released on Tuesday, November 1st. So the TA centers will be busy with planning and hosting pre-application training in the coming months. So look out for those dates and locations in your region. And the pre-application training will helps grant applications with understanding the notice of funding opportunity and the elements that go into writing a grant application for ANA. So if you want more information on the training or any of our services, please go ahead and visit your local regional training and technical assistance center. And I think Gina got kicked out and she's back in. Are you there, Gina?
Hi, Connie. Sorry, I lost reception for a moment. Sorry about that.
That's okay. Is there anything you wanted to say, anything more you wanted to say about the documentary? I just said I enjoyed it and encouraged everyone to watch it and to have a box of tissues by when you watch it, especially the healing portion and towards the end of the documentary.
Yeah, and I just wanted to thank everyone who is a veteran who's watching and watching now, to thank them for their service.
Absolutely.
And to encourage everyone to work with their veterans.
Yeah. Right. Thanks, Gina. So that's it for the webinar. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. I know everyone is busy and has busy schedules, so we appreciate you taking the time out today to join us. Copying what Gina, a very special shout out to any veterans who are joining us today. Thank you for your service. I wanted to let you know after the webinar, a survey should pop up on your screen. This survey is to let us know how you enjoyed today's webinar or not enjoy. And if you have any future webinar topics you would like ANA to present on, let us know. Just a reminder to everyone that this webinar was recorded and it will be available in about 2 weeks on Eastern's website as well as ANA's website. So thank you again for joining us. Thank you to Gina for sharing her knowledge and stories with us, and the great work that Trickster is doing out in Illinois with the veterans and their community. So with that, stay safe, everyone, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you. Wado.